What's up, parish orphans and retrogrades? I bring to you a show with Mr. Matt Fradd. Today, we're going to be discussing doubt and despair, which is rampant in the Catholic Church. Matt, what's up, man? How the heck are you?
G'day, Tim. Lovely to be on your excellent show. I'm fantastic. Well, no, I'm not. I actually feel a little under the weather. But other than feeling a little under the weather, everything's really great.
Is it a Steve Angrisano song? The one about beer bug, as we call it here lovingly on Rules for Retrogrades, called Taste and Smell, the goodness of the Lord. Can you taste and smell?
Well, we'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't want to. Yes.
That's what I ask everyone now that, not that you haven't.
Because of yes, whether we had the COVID or not. Yes, I don't know.
No. I ask them, can you taste and smell? That's my new joke. My wife made it up. It was presciently written before.
I don't think it was Steve Agrisano who wrote that, though, was it? He's relatively
know. Yeah. I think they're all that way. I just assume he makes me Angrisano when I hear his song. Okay. I don't know who wrote that one, but you're good. You're good enough to go. God
absolutely.
Bless you. Yeah. What are you doing? What are you up to? You've been putting out high quality content. I've seen a lot of the stuff you did. The live stream you did yesterday interested me a lot, and I called you up and I said, do you want to chat some about it more broadly, about doubt and despair in the faithful Catholic world?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, and I think the show is really well. I've been really enjoying doing in-person interviews. I just think it's just there's something to it, that you can lose when you do Skype interviews. So there's so many people in Steubenville who I love and admire, so it's easy to kind of get them across the table from me. Yeah, so that's just been going really well. And yes, we discussed Steve Skojec, who I hadn't really heard of until yesterday morning. If you had said his name, I would have said, yeah, I think he's a traditional kind of Catholic guy, maybe 1 Peter 5. That's all I would have known. But I read a couple of the things that he wrote, and I was actually really moved by it. I'm always moved by honesty. It just feels like there's so much fake out there. People are always appealing to their crowd, trying to say the thing that makes their crowd cheer them on. So whenever I see somebody who seems to be honestly saying something that would get them in hot water with their tribe, I always find that admirable. And so from what I read, I'm sorry that Steve seems to be going through something, but I thought it was cool and courageous of him.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's rest on the point for half a minute. Steve is good at this. I mean, he's a friend of mine. You said you guys have never chatted, but we've been friends. He supported me when I was before I was fired, 6 months before I got fired, when some of the trads were angry, in the whole SSPX debacle. He was supportive. Then when I got fired, he's one of the most supportive of the trads. By the way, this is the 1 year anniversary of that, June 3rd of last year.
Oh, wow. Today. Wow. Yeah.
But so Steve is a good independent thinker, and yet he is decrying something that I think is striking a chord that could be really positive for a lot of people if he keeps it in bounds. I was one of the people that, of course, reached out to him by email. I'd lost his number because I switched phones, blah, blah, blah. Now we have each other's contact info again, and we're back in contact. But I think he needs to just bound that function. And my main thing, I'd like you to react to this, Matt, see what you think, because I think your journey, as they say, is a little more similar to mine. We're all similar ages, me, you, and Skojec. And he grew up in the faith, was always put off by aspects of the 80s and 90s Novus Ordo faith as it goes. And yet he hewed closer to the church through all of that mild doubt. He kind of, I don't want to say papered over it, because it was an admirable thing. He had his association with Legionnaires of Christ, and he stayed close to Mother Church. Whereas, I won't speak for you, but I want to give you the chance. I, in the 20s, nearly fell away, came close to what most people would call falling away. So I do talk about what happened when I was 28, 29 as a sort of reversion, even though I never rejected the church. But it was just the ridiculousness of post-conciliar times, the trappings, the indicia, the ludicrousness of the faith. But I did, through the travails in my 20s, I got out the doubt, and literally, I come from science family. I tested all those theories, and when I came back at 28 or 29, I have certitude. Christianity is the one true faith. Roman Catholicism's the one true version of it. I was not accepting those two propositions, those nested propositions, simply because the church told me so. Now Steve's like, I don't know, should I question everything? I don't think he'll fall away, but people have been saying don't go Eastern Orthodox to him for a while. I want him to know that the best reason to accept those two nested propositions, Christianity is true, Roman Catholicism is the only fully true version of it, is not because the church says so, even though the church also says so. What do you make of that? Could this be a positive thing if people take that approach to it?
Yeah, well, for me personally, I kind of was brought to church as a child, but stopped really believing when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I didn't really buy it. It didn't really grip my heart. I wasn't really interested. I was kind of bored with the whole thing. And I started asking questions about God's existence and things like that. But even though I had those intellectual questions, I wouldn't say my conversion was an intellectual one. I wouldn't say it was an emotional one either, because I think that downplays what happened to me. It was more, I would say, a conversion of encounter, where I encountered the person of Jesus Christ, and it was unlike anything I had ever experienced, not just degree, but a difference in kind. Looking back now, it's like my heart defrosted and I began to experience Jesus Christ in prayer, and the whole world just made a lot more sense to me. And I suddenly became happy and everything just started clicking into gear. And that's when I started looking into arguments, I guess, in response to those who were then objecting to me, be they Protestants or atheists. I was kind of gradually fed up with a lot of the sort of pandering at church, of which I was a part, playing guitars at mass and this sort of thing. I think best of intentions, like really wanted people. What's that?
You're fed up with yourself.
Yeah, well, every day I'm fed up with myself. Yeah, but yeah, I think we had the best of intentions. We wanted people to experience this person of Jesus Christ, but often it came off as pandering or hokey. Anyway, so in that sense, maybe you and I have had a similar journey. Whereas I can't imagine what it's like to now question your faith. Like, I'm 37. To be like in your faith at that age. And I think for Steve, he's in full-time ministry, as it were. That's got to be a terrifying thing to now question it. And whether he is or he isn't, I'm not terribly sure. I'm still a little unclear as to whether he's questioning the whole thing or not. But that's got to be scary. But I do think, like, to your question, I think it can be of help to some people. Why? Simply because he's saying things the way that he sees them. And whenever you do that, whenever you don't try to say things the way other people are saying them, but you just try to say it as you see it, I think you inevitably find that there's a lot of other people who are like, you too? I thought I was the only one. I'm also going through that. So in that sense, I think this can be a very helpful thing.
Precisely. Last night, he wrote another piece called "Let's Clear the Air" or something like that. A lot of them, Steve, who is a friend, his piece titles are affectionate. They're kind of like, let's go do something. Let's build a bridge. I think it's called Let's Clear the Air. And, the reader's thinking, well, let's. In this piece, he makes it a few of the things, the propositions you just said, pretty clear, because he said he was going to tend to that. But for the people that are wondering what exactly we're talking about that might not have followed this super closely, the first thing he published to this effect was called An Epidemic of Brokenness. And he published it on May the 27th. Then about 2.5 days later, because that created such a disturbance in the force, he followed up with an article called Against Crippled Religion. Those two pieces were on his private-ish blog called the Skojec File. Last night's piece was on 1 Peter 5, his flagship. Let's clear the air. Let's go make a difference. And it was really, all three of them were really good. They're really honest. And what you said that just a minute ago, Matt, that really hits home is Steve is a really honest guy. And yes, it must be terrifying to be going through these pangs of doubt when you're the editor and proprietor of 1 Peter 5. But he's honest about it. And something beautiful he said at the end of last night's Let's Clear the Air is, hey, look, if I'm not for you, like Jordan on the documentary Last Dance, he said, look, if I'm not the guy that inspires you anymore, and you need to take your support and your patronage and your dollars elsewhere, I understand that. That's beautiful. He's like, on the other hand, this is how I feed my family. I'm not a grifter. I always tell you what I'm thinking when I'm thinking it. And I don't plan on leaving the church. I've been a little concerned about him as a friend, like, hey man, don't leave the church, is what I've thought as I've read some of the things that he's published over the last year. But he says he's not got any plans to. And for those, once again, who missed the tale, he was trying to bring his kids to the sacraments, right? He was trying to get a confirmation and a baptism with an FSSP priest who denied him because, get this, because he wasn't showing up during the COVID dispensation. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, can we talk about the COVID dispensation a little bit? I have some thoughts on it. Maybe.
Yeah. Let me first say, however, like, I am reluctant to address the situation of the baptism just because I don't know the priest side of the story. I imagine he's in a position where he's either unwilling or unable to defend himself. So, there's probably another side to this story. And, so I'm not making a judgment one way or the other, but anyway.
No, that's good. I'm glad you got that disclaimer out of the way, because I'm not, there's always there's two sides of a story. Now, it doesn't always mean that it's going to wind up 50-50, but it boggles the mind to consider how many adults are walking around out there. This is something you teach your kindergartners. There's always two sides to a story. It doesn't always wind up 50-50, like relativism, but go get the other guy's side of the story. Now, this guy probably doesn't want to. And Steve also, in Let's Clear the Air last night, he also, I think, fairly addressed that. He's like, look, he's a good priest. Like, he's basically saying don't beat up on him. But I wanted to address instead something that I think has perplexed lots in the Catholic world. And again, the perplexion has fallen squarely on the side of the faithfuls and the traditionals. What are we to make? This is what I would do, to say nothing of the individual priests that did this. It's just the occasion for the Gordon and Fradd taking it on right now. What do we say as Roman Catholics about, I don't know, Episcopal acts, such as, the Episcopal act during the beer bug to dispense us all from going to mass? If you like, what a lot of trads and even faithfuls do is they look at it, and if it's a low quality, low fidelity bishop, whatever you will, they're like, well, that dispensation's not valid. That is modernism from Catholic right wing. Like, it's not up to us. The power of binding and loosing. And I've said this during COVID myself, because for my own reasons, I don't have a Latin mass nearby. We were using the dispensation to take a time of reorientation in a different way from Steve. But I've been having this conversation throughout the entire last 15 months. Like, if a bishop dispenses the Sunday obligation, then going extra is great. But at this point, the Sunday mass is essentially what daily mass is, laudatory, but not necessary. Why don't so many people get that? And isn't that just a plain rejection of the power of binding and loosing? I say it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is a sad state of affairs where we look to our secular officials and say we don't trust them, and then we look to our ecclesial officials and say the same thing. It's almost like we're divesting them of the authority that Christ has given them and putting it where exactly? I don't know, but no, I would agree with you that whether or not it's a good decision, that's a different question. It could be, say, the wrong thing to give a dispensation to Catholics for a significant period of time. But that's a different question to, have they done that? And if they have, then they have. And since we're faithful sons and daughters of the church, I think that should settle it.
Yeah. And also it's a question of discretionary authority, which was my main point. I agree with everything you said, but if it's ultimately by the calculus of heaven, like a wrong decision, which it might well be. I'm more of a denier or a doubter of the topic at hand than Skojec was. So I guess it makes my position even more egregious with my defense of not going to mass some of these Sundays. But it's a matter, this is the constitutional attorney in me, and it's a matter of discretionary authority. If it's a wrong decision, it's a wrong decision on the heads of the bishops who stand in the shoes of the apostles. It's not on our shoulders. It's above our pay grade. That is what it means to believe in this very, very important, very Catholic doctrine of binding and loosing. It's not a small deal. It's on their heads. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. So I wanted to get that out there.
You know what I was thinking the other day, slightly different topic, but not really. I wonder what kind of pope could be elected next that would unite all of us, and whether that's even possible at this point. Now, of course, I hope it's possible. But it just feels like you've talked about trad spirals in the past. I don't know if you want to define that again, because I thought that was a really interesting term. And it's one that I've felt kind of tempted to at times, especially as I kind of react to the liberalism and modernism in the church. But it seems like people in trad communities are very kind of skeptical of even people like John Paul II and Pope Benedict XVI. So that I wonder, like, well, what would satisfy them, or what would satisfy those on the other side at this point? And have we kind of reached a point of no return, as it were?
Because of this, it's an interesting question. Like, first off, because of all the consistories of Francis, who is a sower of doubt and discord, according to me. I don't know what your official view is at this point in 2021, but and he is. I mean, now that it looks credible that he's preparing to undo the dictates of Summorum Pontificum, take away the Latin Mass. Just a vindictive. I just think a vindictive man, right? And sowing doubt among the people that believe that having a bad pope ought to sow doubt in the faith. And that's really unfortunate, because ecclesially, the church is built to forbear, to withstand a bad pope. But he's had enough consistories, Matt, where now he's essentially guaranteed the fashioning of a pope who will run him up, who will follow upon his pontificate, number 267. That will I think look just like him. But now, what would satisfy the trad? The trads is a widespread term, and I couldn't tell you some of them, but what would satisfy me, assuming that this is going to be a cardinal that is elevated to the Bishop of Rome next, what would satisfy me that's tremendously unlikely would be Sarah or Burke, right? Either of these guys would be amazing. I'm not a complicated dude in that way. What do you say?
No, I agree with you. I've talked about this in the past about kind of gaslighting, we're all talking about that more and more these days. Right. But it's that kind of thing where Pope Francis says something that's either confusing or false or questionable, and you question it, and everyone's like, calm down, you spaz. Why are you being so weird about it? You're like, I'm not. I'm pretty sure this is a legitimate thing. You keep getting yelled at. And so I think when you say this trad is a wide spectrum, I think people are being pushed further and further into the sort of edges of, SSPX kind of thing. I don't know, But
then you get pushed back. I mean, this is
the
great process of centrifugation in life. Then you get pushed back the other way, and then you're literally, if you're way off course in the ship, right, you jerk the wheel the opposite direction. I guess you can do this if you're like a sea captain. You don't have the luxury of doing this if you're on the highway. If you jerk the wheel too far in the wrong direction, you fly off the highway. But you're going this way now, and you're going this way before. And you need to course correct. And so then what tends to happen within faithful Catholicism, the bounds of demographic faithful Catholicism, to I think the open-minded people that are good at sounding out the truth, and I do count Skojec among them, is it tends to be a series of opposite overcompensations. So you overcompensate a little to the left, then to the right, then to the left, but the angles are growing more and more acute. right? So
Mhm.
you're getting closer to the middle. Hopefully by the time you're an old Catholic guy, you're pretty close to the middle. And so this has happened to me, and people have seen it semi-publicly, as my life has been shaped over the last year and a half, 2 years, since like the TNT days, is going back and forth. And I this is how to obviate doubt, is by just saying, okay, I went a little too far this way. Then I spent a couple months, and I'm still writing the Vatican II book, sort of rebuffing those who overdoubt Vatican II, but then I went too far the other way, and now I'm going back. Like, to me, this is just how you sound out the truth, like a tuning fork, right? What I think that's the way out of doubt, which leads to despair. I should say this at the beginning. Despair is like the sin against the spirit. It's like the unforgivable sin. It's doubt so much that you don't even believe that God could save you. It's true doubt, true doubt writ large. Doubt itself is not a sin, but this is how you keep doubt from becoming despair.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And the only way I really know how to do that is to keep listening to the church. And I would rather listen to the church. Like, I actually don't know about these claims about Pope Francis getting rid of the Latin Mass. I didn't even know that was really possible. I don't know the likelihood of that. But if that were the case, I would not go to the Latin Mass. And that'd be disappointing. And that might be even tragic and awful, but it might just be a period of church history where a pope made a really bad decision. But
Right.
throughout that, I don't know who else to listen to. So I need to kind of keep listening to the church. Does that make sense? To kind of course correct myself, because nobody who's going one way or the other realizes that necessarily. It's like whatever way your car is facing, it feels like you're going forward, and you are in relation to yourself. But I want to. I mean, unless a bishop comes out and teaches heresy, that's obviously different. But
Right. No, of course that makes sense. I mean, look, man, that's the teaching of the church. Now, I should stipulate some. So basically, Pontificum Summorum Pontificum was essentially the Roe versus Wade of Latin Mass. Of course, Roe versus Wade is very bad. Summorum Pontificum was good, but what it really did is, according to its first lines, published in 2007 by Pope Benedict, it made it illegal for any bishops to make the Latin Mass illegal. It always insisted on the truism that the Latin Mass has never been abrogated. So if Francis did nullify it, which at first I didn't believe, it's looking more and more likely, which would be another kind of blow to the faithful.
You're not wrong. What a way to cause schism.
What a way to cause it. And I think that's what I think he's doing. I think he's playing on the over right-wing reactionary aspect by just what he would be doing is not abrogating Summorum Pontificum unless he went over the status of life that it was even in, before 2006. So the Latin Mass would still not be abrogated. It would just be now, it would be legal for certain bishops, and a lot of the libs would do it to make it illegal. But yeah, with that said, with that stipulation, I agree with you. If the Pope, even who I take to be clearly the worst Pope in the history of Catholicism, I just finished Julian Maloney's book on St. Gallen Mafia. I wrote the foreword. I think he's definitely the worst Pope. But if he's Pope and he did do something even more aggressive than just restricting, the niceties of Summorum Pontificum, then yeah, it's not a choice. This is what people don't get. The Pope is a monarch. If we get a bad one, it's really bad, but we still have to be on board. Why would you leave? This is the way you clear up doubt. Why would you leave? Where would I go? Off the bark.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to say to that, but it's a terrifying and tragic thought. It's really like you would see a split within the church that you haven't seen in since the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah, potentially. Here's what I've been wrestling with lately, as between the wise will and the permissive will of God. When I'll just use me. I don't want to overextend the analogy to you or Steve. I'll just use myself. For those of us that did basically fall away, in the 20s. What and picked up some very helpful, very beneficent life experience that oriented us in natural Aristotelian ways back to the undeniable truth of the one true faith. You know, is this like God just allowing what happened to you, you know, the fact that you're more or less out of the church for some time, as part of his wise will or his permissive will? Because, and the reason I say I struggle with it, not seriously intellectually, I know what the Catholic answer is, but like, I don't know. I read Steve Skojec's 3 Pieces. He's a knowledgeable, faithful, good Catholic, good man, I believe, and a friend. And yet he's going through crippling pain because he didn't do this earlier. Is there something to that if you get this out of the system when you're younger? This is a legit question. It's not a reformed worldview. Is it better to get the doubt out when you're younger than when you're old? Kind of like the chicken box. It's less bad when you're young than when you're old.
Well, I mean, to me, I think it from a kind of naturalistic perspective that your personality tends to be formed when, like around 25 or maybe a little after. So you're much more likely to have a sort of revolution in your worldview prior to that. People certainly have it after that. I've known people in their 50s who've converted from atheism to Catholicism and things like this, but it's a lot more, I think, exhausting, and it feels like the rug's being pulled out from under your feet. So just from a sort of naturalistic sort of, from looking at it from a natural point of view, if you're in your 40s and you go through this sort of crisis, especially when you're receiving money teaching the Catholic faith and you've built up an apostolate that's doing good work in that area, that's got to be a heck of a lot, much more of a crisis, not just because you have kids and they've been baptized and you have a wife who might be Catholic or a husband or whoever, but also a lot of your income and your identity and how people have like understood you and perceived you and related with you was based on that. Just from that point alone, it's got to be a lot harder. As far as like, I mean, obviously, I think, being the father of 4 kids, it's really interesting trying to raise them in the faith, right? So like I've got a child who I know that if I tried to make him come to mass with me every day, like it wouldn't be good. Like I could see him maybe rebelling or for whatever reason, his personality or the way I'm doing it or both. And so like I'm just sort of like hands back, just praying and allowing our Lord to sort of guide him and permitting him to hold certain views and beliefs in hopes that the Lord will bring things full circle in his life and my other kids' lives. It's a real difficult thing to trust when you look at people and you see what the Lord is permitting in their life. You want the right thing, you know what I mean? Like their sanctification and them to believe the right things, but it's very difficult sometimes to want the right thing in the right way. We often want the right thing in an impatient, white-knuckled, let's make this happen kind of way. And we don't take into account the great patience and meekness of God, and that he has a plan in all of this, and he might be calling us to trust through all of this. So I don't know if that's makes any sense.
No, it's helpful. And I think that's helpful for people listening. If we could give them one takeaway and then keep this short, because I know you're not feeling well. Like what I want people to know is that when you experience doubt, right, attribution for the source of the doubt and the ramification for the doubt is incredibly important. Like it's natural.
Yes.
During the Francis period to be like, wow, I doubt, you know, I can't help but psychologize. I absolutely doubt his sincerity as a physician. I doubt whatever, but it doesn't make me doubt the office or the munus of Pope. It's just like, okay, now we're seeing in ways that are probably unprecedented, that whether it's a punishment or a test or whatever, the Lord will allow even a new level of misbehavior, via free will to sit on the throne of Peter. And that doesn't make me doubt the church. Then I'm like, I don't know if I'm weird or equipped with something from the 20s, like we just talked about, or some other thing. Maybe it's
it's a grace. I think it's probably a grace for you to look at so much ugliness and disorder and to not, cower back from that.
Where are you at with it? I mean, like, because it's a bad time.
I mean, I don't know what else to say, except I keep falling on my knees and begging Jesus to make things clear to me. Like, really, that's what I do. I'm trying to avoid listening to this YouTuber or reading this particular blog or seeing this person's scoop on things. And I'm actually trying to, like, when I feel kind of overwhelmed by the different opinions, like I'll walk out into my office. Sometimes I'll just fall on my knees and I'll just like beg the Lord for clarity, beg him to guide us through this, to say what I know to be true. You are God. I am your son. I thank you for what you've called me to do. Help me to repent of my sin. I thank you for my family. Just getting back to those basics really helps for me. And I really like what you said there about kind of identifying the source of your doubt. I think it was perhaps in the Screw Tape Letters where the demon didn't ever want this individual who was experiencing doubts to track down why it is he was doubting. Rather, keep it all foggy, keep it all a haze. Because there has been times in my Christian walk where I've found myself doubting whether all of this is true. And the times that I've gone through that, I've thought to myself, okay, now what is it? Like, is it God's existence? Is it the historicity of Jesus? Is it the establishment of the Catholic Church? Like, trying to narrow, and often when you narrow it down, you're like, oh, that's it? That's the thing that's causing me consternation? Well, let's deal with that. Let's do an intellectual pursuit in this area, or let's pray over this, or something like that.
Right. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I forgot about that passage in Screw Tape Letters, but it's absolutely there. And it stands to reason, right? It's just the natural virtue of locating, like, okay, you go into the doctors. Well, we've talked about this before. You go into the doc, because I used to have bad stomach issues, when Abby was young. You go into the doctor, you're like, oh, my core is hurting. You're like, okay, your core is basically everything, between your waist and your nipples, like where? And they aim small, miss small, as marksmen say. You got to try to find a narrow 2-inch by 2-inch area of your core that's hurting you. And if you aim for a small area, then you'll miss in smaller ways. You'll get closer to the mark. And so it's just the natural virtue of identifying what's bothering you, what's plaguing you.
That's great.
Even if you get in fights, I mean, this is what people can really take home. It stands for supernatural faith. It's a natural virtue. If you get in more fights than a typical month with your spouse or your friend, you have to get to the root of, like, okay, what is this? Yeah. You said that I really like, Matt. Just one last thing. It all comes back to the two beautiful expressions you've made in this cast. Obedience, where you're like, it would suck if we got the order to do X and thus and such, but I would do it. Obedience, and then that kind of all-encompassing prayer where you submit everything. You're like, thank you for everything that I have. Please help me with all of the travails I have. You're God, I am not. Those two things, obedience and that kind of evangelical prayer, that's the way out of the doubt. I think that's right.
Yeah. And I think this is so obvious, it may be not worth saying, but often when things are so obvious, we stop saying them for that reason. So here you go. I say it to myself as well. Like, yeah, it's more exciting to listen to a political podcast or to read some hot take on whatever. But what I'm called to do is to read the word of God and to imitate Jesus Christ. And I wonder if a lot of our confusion and our angst and our doubt, because gosh, you can't spend more than 5 minutes on a sort of political website without feeling angry and fearful. And so to take that time and just to violently tear your attention away from it and just to read a chapter of the Gospels every day, that sounds simple, but it might be the very thing that can, bring back a sense of peace and direction to our lives.
Beautiful. And all this is very evangelical. And this is what the trads need, a little more evangelical. We need to just hit your knees, thank God for what's good, pray sincerely for what's bad in your life, remember your obedience, and remember that our primary charge is to spread his word and to do, and then all of these, ridiculous terms like pastoral and all that, they fall by the wayside because we find ourselves being adaptive in the way that you are when you really care about spreading the word and in your private life being obedient. So I think this is why I always like talking to you, Matt, because there's always such a good synthesis I find of our ideas naturally. And it's not
Cool.
because it's, you know, what type of Catholic are you? That stuff is ridiculous. It's just Catholic. It's universal in its import. So I really appreciate you coming on with me today. And I think a lot of people will be helped by it.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to having you on my show soon too.
Yeah, we're going to be doing Aquinas stuff. Two quick plugs. One, in the fall, now that we can say we're basically in summer, in the South it's summer, I will be opening up Retrograde Academy. It is for homeschoolers, for aid. I've been telling people, pull your kids out of the public school, pull your kids out of the Catholic school, homeschool them yourself. It's the truly Catholic tradition. And a lot of people are afraid. They're naturally kind of timorous going into this big move. I have at Retrograde Academy online, go to timothyjgordon.com and see the classes, which are narrowly tailored to the classes that homeschoolers communicated to me they need the most, but feel the least equipped to teach, like Latin 1, like algebra, some of the unsexier things, lots of theology courses as well. timothyjgordon.com. Prepare to pull your kids out of the schools this fall, if you can do it. And we'll help you do it at the Retrograde Academy at timothyjgordon.com. Also, I've been saying to people, look, you got to pool your resources at the political level. And you got to get out of blue states, get from blue states to red states, go to realestateforlife.org. And a good Catholic, most likely, or at the very least, a Christian who's pro-life will help you to do this. People need to gather where there are other faithful Catholics, or at the very least, Christians who don't want to kill them or don't want them silenced, as neighbors, as fellow denizens of their little republic, their little polis. And that's some of what we'll be talking about, I think, when we talk about Thomas Aquinas next time on your show, Matt. But thanks a lot
for
coming on with us.
All right. Thanks very much.
God bless you, man.